we kick it off with family offices, which have been making news for all kinds of reasons in the last few weeks. But before that, I just want to, set some context here on the role of family offices in India. So, Abishek and Rahul, I was going through a few data points, and Indian family offices today manage $30 billion in AUM across 300 family offices. That's a whopping number. And this is expected to reach $45 billion over the next 3 years. And, this is interesting as well. In 2024 alone, family offices contributed $9.6 billion to venture capital investments in Indian startups. For the longest time, the likes of Tiger Global and Alpha Wave, I think we were at the mercy of some of these hedge funds and foreign investors. But it's heartening to see so much of Indian money, rupee money, making its way back into the private and public markets. So I just want to get opening remarks from both of you, Rahul and Abishek. You've worked with family offices for a very long time, on the role that they play today and how important they've become in terms of scale and scope. Rahul, you want to start?
Sure, thank you. So very interesting question. I guess I will touch on the point about the venture capital investments that have taken place. So I think this touches on a few different themes. The first is that clearly, the support that the family offices are providing in this ecosystem is beneficial for entrepreneurs, for startups, and allowing, emerging businesses to be able to access another pool of capital is obviously very encouraging. But I think another theme of this relates to the broader investment capability of the individuals who are making these investment decisions in family offices. So different family offices, at least from what I've observed, are at various points of their evolution. There are some that are extremely mature, who have been making investments, who have been building systems and processes, hiring professionals for a long period of time. And then there are some who have only recently...
Rahul, if you can hold the mic closer.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And there are some who have only recently created, their wealth and their corpus. And I think that, there have been a lot of investments which have made maybe with less discipline. And, over the last few years, many of the venture capital funds have not returned capital. Many of these private startup investments have not been able to show the returns that maybe people anticipated. So while it's great, I think, for, the segment as a whole, I do think that there is an increasing amount of questioning that is happening internally within a lot of these family offices about that skill set and about ultimately what are the returns that are being generated through these investments.
Right. I'm going to come to the returns in a bit. But Abhishek, in the last decade, you've had the opportunity to work with multiple family offices, be it Catamaran, which is N.R. Narayan Murthy's family office. You're currently an advisor for Sharrp, which is Harsh Mariwala's family office. And you also work with the Cipla family. So, between all these family offices, again, is there a uniform way in which they go about investing? How does the risk-return framework work for some of these family offices? How is it different from how a VC or a PE fund would operate?
Thank you, Chandra. So, they're very different. So one of the first things I say is every family office is different. Very idiosyncratic in the way we think of risk, we think of return. I mean, risk means so many things to different people, right? Risk for some people might mean permanent loss of capital. For some people, it might mean volatility. For others, it might mean reputational risk. So you actually really need to determine what risk means to a certain family to then discuss return in that context. And I've seen it in my own life, right? When I was at Catamaran, we had a certain notion of risk. When I came to Sharrp, we have a very different notion of risk. So I think it's very, very important when you think of the family office landscape to think of what risk means in that context before you start thinking about return. I mean, I have multiple family offices looking at, small cap and mid cap managers and looking at their returns and saying, why can't we be that? But that's a very different risk profile that you're willing to take. So I think every return should be in the context of risk. Every family office is very idiosyncratic in that approach. So I think it's very, very important for entrepreneurs and sort of partners of family offices to understand where family offices are coming from. And also within the family office to have that conversation, because notions of risk, even within generations, are different, Chandra. The younger generation, the older generation, they view risk differently. So aligning that notion of risk and then discussing return in that context is very important.
Right. I want to touch upon what Rahul mentioned in terms of the returns that family offices have seen. How has it been for you, and how has it been for the landscape in general?
Well, I've had the privilege of working with family offices that have had wonderful returns. We've been in top decile in the various asset classes we've operated in. But I think this also comes with a degree of maturity that Rahul mentioned. It's about understanding that returns go through cycles. A lot of family offices today, unfortunately, haven't seen the bear cycle. So I'm a little bit concerned when they look at their returns over the last 4 or 5 years, they're going to get an awakening of sorts, right, as we go through the next cycle of returns.
I think everyone is getting an awakening of sorts in the current market.
But I think the family offices have great advantages, right? They have the ability to have long-term horizons. They have the ability to bring operational insight to investing. They have the ability to sort of leverage the synergies of the operating companies. And I think that has actually contributed to outsized returns in some cases. Like at Sharrp, for example, we've had an incredibly successful direct-to-consumer portfolio. And I think part of that has come from discipline to sticking to our knitting, to sticking to something we really understand, and that we can have synergies from the Marico company. And I think it's really important if their family offices find what their differentiation is, you'll see outsized returns over time.
Right. Rahul?
Yeah, I guess I would just touch on a few points. The first is, I think what Abishek also mentioned, which is when we say family, a family is not typically just one person. It's multiple people. And those people can be all from different, they're probably going to be different ages. And, the first point I would mention is that, at least in the DSB family office, there is a different mindset between, let's say, what my father-in-law's perspective is on, let's say, risk, which is highly calibrated towards capital preservation versus maybe what the younger generation is looking for, which is, long-term growth and more exposure to, let's say, equity. So the first is when we say family office, it's about, we think about it as one entity, but it's comprised of people. And these people have, different ages, and they might have different risk tolerances and different mindsets. So I think, there is an evolution that has to happen where the families themselves need to become, more sophisticated and mature and have an alignment on how they're going to approach, just something as simple as asset allocation. So I think that's just one theme that I would also highlight.
Right. And, again, how does one maintain discipline in making some of these decisions? You're not answerable to, external LPs. It's your wealth. So in that sense, you have more freedom. But again, what kind of discipline does it take? Are you roping in more professionals from the VC industry, PE industry? Structurally, how are things evolving as far as family offices are concerned?
So first comment is that this would differ depending on the family office. I think, Abishek, to your point, every family office is different, and every family office might be at a different stage of their journey. Some are far more professional, and some are just becoming professional. I think when it comes to this particular point about discipline, at least from my observation, this is one of the critical risk areas that any family office should be aware about, and especially when it comes to family members making investment decisions. There's a certain skill set that was required to build the wealth in the first place, and there's a certain set of individuals or individual who was the primary driver of that wealth creation. But that skill set may or may not be transferable into how to manage wealth and investment allocation. And it is easy for family members to have that discretion and have that power to be able to drive decision making. And if you don't have the right accountability or the right discipline, then it won't, it is possible that mistakes can be made, and sometimes those mistakes may not be realized for many, many years. So I think that this point is something for all family offices to keep in mind and to think about how they're mitigating that risk. Just one comment I would make also about how I've thought about this is that I come from a background which is focused on the clean energy space and sustainability, and I wanted to start using some of the family office capital to make investments in the space. But rather than doing it specifically through the family office only, we are doing it now through a private equity fund where we are also managing third-party capital. And as a result, it brings a certain degree of discipline because we are now accountable to those other investors as well. So I think there's different approaches that families can take, whether it's internal or working with other families. But this entire point of capability and accountability, I think, is very important to think about.
Right.
So if I could just come in, I'm very grateful that family offices are professionalizing. People like me have jobs. And I think that's actually one of the hidden areas of risk, not being clear about where the circle of competence ends for a family office. And I think just bringing in professionals is actually a very, very important part of professionalizing, getting the family office right. Because you're really moving out of the echo chamber. Operating and investing are two different worlds. And I think family offices who recognize that are the ones that actually flourish.
Right. In the current market environment, what kind of opportunities are you looking at in the public markets and the private markets? Because, public markets have sort of taken a hit in the last few weeks, and there is still a lot of uncertainty because of the way the world is, and we don't know how the tariff wars are going to pan out. And, that usually also has a knock-on effect on private market valuations. People are already talking about new age companies deferring IPOs. In these circumstances, what are you all doing differently? Are you holding back from making commitments? Are you investing, more in safer instruments? How has your own investment strategy evolved because of the current market?
Right. I think part of the advantage we have is a real long-term horizon. So I think the short cycles of correction are actually opportunities for us to get more aggressive. So in some sense, when we see valuations correcting, we're kind of leaning into...
So this would be aggression in public or private market?
In both.
In both.
In both. Actually, we don't differentiate.
Because you have a 40% exposure to private
Yes,
market.
we're one of the more aggressive ones. We're actually, first of all, 100% equity. We're 60% public and 40% private. And when I say 40% to counterparts, they say 40%, that's a lot of risk. I think of it differently. That 40% is something we know really, really well. So I think the notion of if you know something really well, you're actually taking risk off the table is something that we believe. So we're leaning in. When you think of decadal opportunities, India's just getting started. So we're kind of putting more capital behind entrepreneurs that we believe have the stamina to stay. And I think for us, that's the most important aspect. Now, as we look through this correction, we lean into opportunities where we believe the entrepreneurs have the stamina to withstand the cycle. And they have the stamina to run these companies for 10 to 20 years, which is slightly different from 2-3 years ago. Where you said, okay, these guys are going to get here and maybe then that's a chance for an exit. But I think our horizon has changed. We're leaning in. And even on the public side, I think there are managers in our ecosystem who've done exceptionally well through multiple cycles, Chandra. So for us, it's about discovering and partnering with those managers who've seen the cycles of the market, who have still delivered alpha over multiple cycles, and partnering with them for the next phase of growth.
Right. Rahul?
So I think, what comes to mind is two themes. Circle of competence, which you mentioned, and long-term time horizon. So at least in the DSP family office, I think the focus has been on trying to identify and understand investment ideas and opportunities which are close to the circle of competence. And that might be, within the business itself, or it could also be relationships, integrity, trust, people that you know for a long period of time, founders that you believe in and have known for a long period of time, who you can back for a long-term time horizon. So again, circle of competence. And then secondly is that long-term time horizon piece, which is an advantage that that family offices in many cases should have. And in this case, to the point about, let's say, a market correction, or, let's say even whether it's public or private, that is an opportunity to invest even more. And if you really believe in the business and that it'll be here in 10 years, then that's actually probably what the right call should be. And family offices who have that mindset, can then take advantage of those situations. And, because of the access to liquidity, or the requirement not to have liquidity, that can deliver outsized returns. So it just depends on the family office, but I'm only commenting from the DSP family office side, but circle of competence and long-term time horizon are guiding, I think, a lot of the decision-making right now.
Right. In the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of discussion and conversation and debate about whether young business heirs are choosing investment over hands-on leadership. I think Mr. Uday Kotak spoke about how, the next generation wants to manage money and not create wealth. And I think Harsh Goenka also wrote about it in a column recently about how, they don't want to work in the trenches, get their hands dirty, but they would rather invest in the public and private markets. What's your own take?
So I hope you've also...
Is it an easy thing to do? Is it the easy way out for, India Inc. 2.0?
Definitely not. So I'll say two things. I hope you've read...
But that's because you told me now, only with family offices you have a good, well-paid job.
Apart from that bias, I'll say two things. I hope you've read Mr. Harsh Mariwala's response to the article.
Which
it came
he
on
wrote
Moneycontrol as
on
well.
Moneycontrol, that's right.
So I can promise you that Rishabh Mariwala, who's the principal of Sharrp Ventures, does not have his feet up on the table. He works hard. He's a learner. He's constantly looking for ways to improve what he does. And he's constantly looking to be the best investment office in the country. So it's not about managing wealth and doing this easy. It's not an easy job. Delivering alpha over a long period of time, I can promise you, Chandra, is almost as hard, if not harder. I know that's a little bit controversial, to starting a company. So I completely disagree with the view that it's an easy job. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of gumption. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of humility. I've seen that in the families I've worked with. I disagree with that view. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for operating families to give back to the ecosystem. Family offices also have this additional advantage of supporting first-time entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And these first-time entrepreneurs, if they didn't have access to stalwarts like Mr. Murthy, like Mr. Harsh Mariwala, they're probably getting a sort of a leg up in their entrepreneurial journey. So I disagree with the view that it's an easy job. I've seen it at close quarters. I've seen it with the families that I work with. It takes a lot of courage. And I hope that India will see a boom of family offices because the next generation brings in a different appetite to risk, brings in a different notion, a different aspiration to the future. And I think all that's valuable for our entrepreneurial ecosystem.
And we've had a whole generation of unicorns that are backed by family offices.
Absolutely.
Rahul?
I think it comes down to the individual. I've read those articles and I can kind of see the validity in some of the points in both ways, but it's very hard to generalize about, all people who work in family offices. So, of course, there probably are some individuals who enjoy the lifestyle, maybe don't have the accounting or the discipline, accountability or the discipline, and some of those criticisms may be valid in those cases. But then there's the other side of it, which is the example that you just mentioned, which is completely the opposite. And also there are certain elements of managing a family office which are not glamorous but are extremely valuable. So interpersonal dynamics, convincing some of these patriarchs to make an investment decision, to change their allocation strategy when they have so much control is not an easy job. Or figuring out, how you're going to succession plan. Somebody has children, somebody doesn't have children. Somebody's working in the family business, someone is not working in the family business. There's a lot of complexity here. And that does require effort and somebody who you can trust to balance these different considerations. Now, that may not be a public-facing value addition in terms of creating a business or making an investment, but that is a tremendous amount of value addition from a family perspective. So I think it comes down to the individual, and there's probably examples, both sides, but I don't think it's fair to say that anyone who's working in a family office is not
chilling and
value.
playing golf. Yeah. It's a lot of hard work. But on that note, I think we are out of time. So to sum up, 300 family offices in India today. Hopefully that number will keep growing and becoming a very strong engine of domestic capital. But on that note, Abishek and Rahul, thank you very much for joining us at the Moneycontrol Global Wealth Summit. Thank you.